What's up, guys? This is TheKephas.
Welcome to SBA Spotlight. In these videos, I'll be covering how well the single button assistant performs for each spec, what it does well, where it falls short, and how to get the most out of it, especially if you're looking for a lower stress or more accessible way to play. So whether you're here to relax, overcome a limitation, or just see how far one button can take you, I've got you covered. Alright, so let's talk about the single button assistant and how it's working out for Frost Death Knights. Now, as of patch 11.2, Frost Death Knights have undergone some pretty significant changes, which means that the single button assistant has also been updated for Frost Death Knights as well. What this means is that the data provided on Wowhead is out of date. It doesn't seem to have been updated. It was estimating Frost Death Knights getting around 80% of optimal DPS potential before the changes. Now, I've tested out a lot of different classes using this tool, and classes with similar item levels as my Frost Death Knight were doing around the same damage, so I'm going to estimate that it's probably close to the same, about 80% of optimal, and that's really where a lot of classes are. 80% with the single button assistant is honestly not that bad. It's actually pretty good, and honestly, of all the single button assistants I've tried out with the different classes, this is one of my favorite. It seems to handle Frost Death Knights really well. There are some little nuances in the spec that it doesn't really work with, but it's also a relatively straightforward class with not too many spells, and it seems to be handling them really well. It's going to spend your runes on Obliterate or Frost Scythe if you're in AoE, and it's going to spend your runic power on Frost Strike and Glacial Advance in AoE. It seems to do a pretty good job with Howling Blast as well. When you're in melee range, it'll use it whenever you get a Rhyme proc, of course, but whenever you're at a distance, it will actually spam Howling Blast, which is kind of nice because the single button assistant doesn't seem to be getting stuck on anything, and it actually allows you to at least do some damage whenever you're far away. So it basically handles your core rotation pretty well and tends to prioritize the buttons that glow. What that means is that if you have Killing Machine, it's going to prioritize that, and then of course it'll prioritize Rhyme as well. It seems to prioritize Killing Machine over Rhyme almost every time. Now, as for your longer cooldown abilities, it will handle most of them. I was actually surprised that Pillar of Frost is included in the single button assistant because that really is your main offensive cooldown, and the tool doesn't usually include those. But in the case of Pillar of Frost, it's in there, which means that with the appropriate talent build, Remorseless Winter will be used along with Pillar of Frost. It'll also use Frostworm's Fury and Reaper's Mark if you are a Deathbringer. It does use Empower Rune Weapon as well, but it's a little bit more inconsistent with how it uses it. Every now and then I will see one charge of Empower Rune Weapon get used. I will rarely see both charges used, and there are lots of times where I will see Empower Rune Weapon sitting at 2 charges, and that's never ideal because you're not going to be benefiting from the cooldown reductions. The good news is there's a way to handle this because Empower Rune Weapon is off the global cooldown. So you are able to create a default macro and include Empower Rune Weapon in with the single button assistant. And this will cause Empower Rune Weapon to be used whenever it's available. It will use up both charges right away, and then it will continue to use those charges as they become available again. So it's up to you if you want to do this or not. It's a choice between having both charges always being used or occasionally having one charge be used, maybe, depending on what the single button assistant feels like doing. Also, there are a couple of cooldowns that the single button assistant doesn't use, which are Raise Dead and Breath of Sindragosa. Now, the good news is that these are also off the global cooldown, so you can actually include them in the macro as well. For that matter, you could also add in Pillar of Frost if you wanted to, because it's also off the global cooldown, and this might allow it to line up better with some of your other abilities, particularly Breath of Sindragosa. It's great to line these up pretty well, and I've noticed that the single button assistant doesn't always line up your cooldowns the way you might prefer, and this is one of the nuances that it just isn't always capable of doing. So even though the tool uses Pillar of Frost, it still might be beneficial for you to include it in the macro as an extra ability, and it will use all of these abilities whenever they're available. You can even include any unused trinkets or racials if you wanted to. I've taken the liberty to create this macro as I'm using it for myself, and you can find it in the description of this video. Simply copy and paste it into the game, into a macro, drag that macro to your action bar, and you'll be good to go. This is going to help with a couple of things. Ideally, this will make sure that you're always keeping these abilities on cooldown, and many of them will line up pretty consistently doing it this way. It's there if you want to use it, and you're free to adjust it as you see fit. Overall, the single button assistant does a pretty good job at maintaining your rotation as a Frost Death Knight. By no means is it flawless. I mean, there are times where I'm capping out on resources and it doesn't always line up cooldowns perfectly. Despite that, it still seems to dish out some pretty decent damage, and you should be able to go pretty far with it. And with a simple macro, you can turn the single button assistant into a true one button rotation for Frost Death Knights, which makes it incredibly user friendly. And that's pretty much everything I've learned for now. But as always, I'd love to hear from you. What do you think of the single button assistant, and how is it working out for you so far? Let me know in the comments. But with all that being said, I will see you guys on the next one.
Thank you for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, let me know by clicking that like button. And feel free to share it with your friends so they can enjoy it as well. And if you'd like to see more videos, you can subscribe to the channel and click on the bell icon to be notified as soon as new videos are posted. You can also follow me on Facebook, and if you'd like, you can support my work on Patreon. Links to all that stuff can be found in the description below. This is TheKephas. Until next time.